In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how we can build this complex shape for the handle for the knife. And we're going to be using a very similar process that we used last video. We're going to be creating shapes inside of Maya and then pushing them over to ZBrush and using the Live Boolean Master and Dynamesh Master and doing a polish feature on it. There is going to be a little bit of a difference in the way that we use the tools for the Live Boolean Master tool, so we can get this shape that you see in here for this complex kind of design. Let's go and hop on over to Maya real quick and see the shapes that were made inside of Maya. So you can see that everything was created in here. One thing I want to kind of tell you about is this structure that I came up with that I think works pretty well, where everything that I'm going to be making for actually making shapes inside of Maya exists within a group that I can just duplicate pretty easily and then convert that over to smooth mesh preview meshes that can be exported into ZBrush. So I've got all these different pieces. The first thing that I made was this handle that you see here, and if I go ahead and hide this, I want to show you just pretty quickly. I'm going to go to the tap spacebar, go to the side, and we can go to mesh tools and say create polygon tool. And I want to show you if I make a point and then have at least like two kind of points within here. We can do something like this. I might do something like this and through here. And we're going to kind of have to feel out just how much geometry that we would need by the time we get done with this shape. So I'm doing this just kind of quickly, like this and through here. Right there, like that, and I'll do another one through here. The more points that you have, the more difficult it's going to be to get a nice smooth curvature for things. So we've got this going on. If I go to the modeling toolkit and use the multi-cut tool and start to cut through some of this stuff, let's just go maybe from here. I always go from an edge and click and drag that to a point, and then that way I always know it's going to start from this point and then click and drag from another edge up to another point. That's how I used to use a different tool within inside of Maya that was very similar to the multi-cut tool. I think it was the split polygon tool, and I just always get very predictable results that way. Now this tool is set up to where you can just click on a point and drag from there, but I've had times when that creates extra geo in there, so that's why I always click and drag from an edge and then go out. So again, I'm trying to just match up the amount of geo that we got going on for this thing, and then I'm going to click and then maybe drag through here. I'm not going to worry too much about curvature because I'm going to show you a little trick in just a second for getting all this geo kind of nice and evenly spaced out. And so I'll go through here like this. And remember, with the multi-cut tool, you can hold down Control and you can split in through here like that. And I can just click and drag from there to there like that, and I'll hit F9. I really don't like that you have to exit out of this tool. I'm going to tap Q to exit out of the multi-cut tool. There might be another way, but I'm just maybe need to spend a little bit of time and investigate that. Now this, I can see right here what I did. I want to turn this into a quad, so I can click and drag from there to there. I'm going to click and drag from here to here like this, and I'll tap Q, hit F10 to go to my edges, or right click on here and say edge. I'm going to select this, get rid of this, and you can see how we can easily turn tris into quads. Now the trick that I wanted to show you is if we go into object mode and we use the quad draw tool in the modeling toolkit area, we can hold down shift and we can use the relax function on this even though it's a flat object like this. And this is going to nice and evenly space out the different pieces that we got going on here for this. And so if we do this, we can do that as well, and we can even do it along the top, and it's going to, like I said, it's going to try to evenly space this stuff out for us. Now if you do it too much, you're going to have to go back through, and we're going to have to go and hit F9, select our verts, and then start to move these around. Now in the side view, I like to use this, or we can use this box to move around. Otherwise, if you spend a little bit of time using this or this, you're only going to move in one axis. So just click on there, click on the box, kind of move this thing around. Whenever you do the smooth mesh preview version of this, it's gonna change quite a bit. You can see I've got an extra vert there. I'll select it, hit delete, and that had an effect on the relax tool that we've got, that one little vert. So keep that in mind too. If you got some extra verts kind of laying around, that can have an effect on things as well. Okay, so I think this is looking pretty decent, at least for our example that we've got going on. Always delete history, Alt-Shift-D for looking in the channel box for that. You can see that that would change. Let's just tap the space bar. Let's just go ahead and select F11 for faces, and then we will shift right click and say extrude face, and then we can just drag this out for a certain amount of thickness like this, right? The next thing that I did was added a split going down through the center here. So if we in an object mode, or if we get the modeling toolkit for an object mode, shift right click, get the multi-cut tool, we can go to the quadro tool, the multi-cut tool within inside of here, and we can just hold down control and we can add a split going down through here. Okay, so tap spacebar. If we tap 3 on this, 4, 5, to get shading, and we can see what this is going to do and start to round out like this. So I'm going to hit F10, select my edges right here, holding down shift and double clicking, and work our way around. And I'll do the same for here, for here, for here, and for here, and then we'll shift right click and we will use the crease tool and middle mouse drag to the right, and we've got everything kind of creased out nice for us. Let's grab this guy right here and this guy right here, and from there what I want to do is start pulling these points in and building a little bit of roundness that you see in the design. So we can look in the perspective view and the side view as well. So I've got that point selected, so maybe it might be easier to select points in the perspective view like this, just to make sure we're selecting one point at a time, and then click and drag this up right in here like this to follow the design that we've got. So I'll select this point here and move it in this view. So again, whatever is going to make your life easier for selection and things like that. Now I might have to drag these guys. I'm not going to get too specific with this shape, just because I'm trying to do this a little bit faster. But as you would finesse this all, you would be following the design that you see in here, and you might have to just move these points around just a little bit to get everything to kind of match up. So I won't go through the entire object, but this is how this was built in through here. So you can see how we're getting a nice, really nice kind of shape like this for this. So that's how that was built for that part. Okay, the rest of these are just some cylinders. I do want to show you these parts for the cylinders. So I'll hit Control 1 to do an isolate select, or we can do show isolate view selected like this. If you take a look at the design, you can see that there's a little bit of this bevel kind of going on. So we've got to do this positive shape like this and pull this in to get these kind of bevels that we see that are going on here. So I'll hit Control 1 like this too, and you can kind of see within here what I'm talking about, how there's an outer part and it dips in a little bit and then cuts out from there. Okay, so those are pretty straightforward, just creating polygon primitive cylinders and then hardening the edges of that. So that was done for all these larger kind of holes, and then I've got a set for the smaller holes. And then I needed to make some shapes that were going to be used for an intersection between this piece and this, so I can get some of this design material that you see here. That was pretty simple to do. I think I showed that in the last video. If we go to create polygon primitives and we do a cylinder like this and we drag it down, let's just see if we take this, duplicate it, and I'll move it over. And if you hit F10 and hold down shift like this, you can shift right click and say bevel edge, and then you can get that to where it basically splits this thing apart. And then I was able to select these verts, just move it over like this, and then once you have something like that, we can take this and we can tap 3, select our edges like this and like this, shift right click and say crease tool, and you got a really nice clean kind of shape for this kind of stuff. So that's how those shapes were made. Just going to go ahead and delete these like that, and that gives us everything that you see here that's kind of lined up with this design, and it's going to give us those intersections. Now what I was talking about, after everything's kind of built, I have everything built in a way to where we can easily manipulate the geometry, and we're still working as if we're wanting to be able to make some changes to this. This is all set in a group, and once the group is done, we can duplicate it. And I'm going to hide that. And so here's the duplicate of the group, and then I just put a send to ZBrush at the end of the group after I duplicated it. You can select the whole group and then go to modify, convert smooth mesh preview to polygons, and it'll convert it over. Now I did go through here and actually let's see if we've got one that's live. I add the divisions and set that up to 3 instead of 2 so I can get a little bit more geo out of all this stuff. The other thing is this was a separate object, this was, and everything that I want to send together and do is one Boolean operation. I went and selected those pieces like you would do like this here, and if you go to mesh and then combine, you can combine the pieces together and delete the history and then just give everything a name. And so you can see everything's got a very nice clean kind of name like that. And to export it out, we just select the group and say File, Export Selection, and do an option for FBX. And when you export that out as an FBX, it'll just be one file. Then you hop on over to ZBrush. So let's hop on over back to ZBrush and let's take a look at importing this stuff in. So importing in, just use the FBX import export options and import in. Once you import in, you should have something that looks kind of like this. I don't think we've got these pieces, would not be there. Let me hide that real quick. With the live booleans turned off, let's see, everything should kind of come in kind of like this, right? And let me just set everything back to its native state. We would turn live booleans on and you wouldn't see any kind of difference at all. Then we would start to say, okay, maybe we'll make this top thing a start object like this and select that. And then we would go maybe here for these large cylinder things, make these a negative shape, so that would cut out there. We've got these shapes here, and I'll talk to you about that in just a second. These should not be there because they don't exist yet, and I'm going to talk to you about how we would make these. These would be a negative shape, and these would be a negative shape as well. Right here like this. So let me just hide these guys real quick, and I'll turn this on. Okay, so this is like maybe everything that we got for negatives. Okay, now I want to talk to you about how we can build those little pieces for the design work. So if we hover cursor over this one and we actually turn it on, and we do instead of this is positive, this is negative, and this is intersection right here like that. The only thing is I don't want this turned on to where it knocks out that shape, so I can just turn off the visibility of these things. And if I do a polyframe, you can kind of see what's going on here. It's going to give us the intersection of that. So to get that, we can either go to Boolean and we can say make Boolean mesh, or we can go to our live Boolean master and say make Boolean mesh. Either one. So let's just say, click this and say make Boolean mesh. And I'll go through and it will make our new shape for us and automatically select it. We don't need the inner part, all we need is the outer part, so I'm going to hold down Control and Shift and select this part right here, like what we see here, like that. Now we can use the delete hidden on my interface. You see it's here. If you want to go into ZBrush's interface, it's under Geometry, Modify Topology, and we've got a delete hidden right here. So that's going to delete everything. Now I'm going to show you ZModeler and how we can extrude faces inside of here, just like you would inside of Maya. The problem is this geometry that we have is like really kind of dense and kind of nasty. It probably could extrude it for us, but it's probably not going to be the best thing. So we're going to use a tool that exists inside of ZBrush to actually make new topology for us. So we're going to open up ZRemesher right here, and then we're going to put this at a target polygon count. I'm going to try 10. I know 20 works, that's kind of high, but this is like 10,000 polys right here. So we'll just click this and say ZRemesher and see what it gives us as far as topology goes. And this is going to be, I would say, okay, but I just don't like the bottoms of these, so I'm going to hit undo real quick. I'm going to put it back up on 20 like what I've had before and run ZRemesher and just run it again just like this one last time, and this should give us a little bit cleaner results. Now it's going to make a bunch of different polygroups. If you want to do the hotkey for making polygroups out of whatever is visible, Control W does that for you just like that. Okay, so now we're going to use ZModeler. That's a brush. So we tap B and go to Z, and then you can find Z Modeler right here. Z Modeler, this is just going to be a very, very fast crash course. I'm going to tap S to drop my brush size down a little bit and zoom in pretty close to here. This brush works off of, if you're hovering over a face or an edge or a vert, you're going to get different options when you right click or push the space bar over the top of these. I'm going to make sure it's over a face, and you can see this nice like kind of arrow thing clicking out whenever you're over a face. Hover over that, hold down the space bar, and you're going to see this big giant menu. We only want to work with Q mesh, and this will be basically like extrusion. We could do a single poly, and that would just do one single polygon, but we're going to do polygroup all. We're going to extrude all this all at the same time. So I'm just going to click and drag out just a little bit like this. With this many polys, it does take a little bit of time for ZBrush to do this, so it's going to finally kind of click and drag out. And I think that thickness is okay. If yours is a little bit thicker than that, you might have to try again. One thing that's kind of cool is all you got to do is go to the back side and then hover over this face and just click once, because it should remember the amount of thickness that it did for the last extrusion, and it extrudes it out just like this. So now we've got some these shapes, and they've got some nice thickness to it. And what we're going to do, I'm going to add some subdivision levels to this, but before I do, I'm going to go to crease, and I'm going to take this crease level and put it down to, let's say, 3. And I'm going to say crease polygroup, and it's going to put a crease along every polygroup that there is there. Now when we divide this and hit Control D, I'm going to hit Control D, and that's going to just very quickly do the hotkey for this divide, and we'll hit Control D again. And after the third division, we'll hit Control D again. It'll start to build some rounding of our corners. We'll hit Control D maybe one more time, and you can see it's going to give just this nice little kind of clean beveling to things or whatever. So we might not actually need 5 levels. We maybe can drop it down to 4 and delete higher or something like that. But this is going to give us this nice clean shapes that we're going to use, that we can append into our other thing, and then use that as a thing to remove shapes from. So I'm going to go back to the stack that we had before, and you can remember we were making this into a this is union, difference, and then intersect. So let's put it back just to the normal one that we see here. We'll click the top blade and maybe hide that part and turn everything else back on like this. And what I'd have to do at that point is just say append, and we would append in the thing that we just made here like this. So I think this is what we just created right here like this, and we can turn this into a negative. And so it's going to give us this at this point, right? And so to work this, all we're going to do is go to the Live Boolean Master plugin. And again, if your plugins are not there, I'm just going to take this and drag it into here. So you might see something like this. Just click and drag it over, open up the Live Boolean Master, and then you know, you could make this top thing a start, and everything else below is going to work as an operation on that. So we'll say make Boolean mesh. It's going to go through. It's going to take a little bit of time to run through that operation, just like this. And when it's done, it should, with this plugin, just give us this new object that we're going to be kind of looking at. We've got non-destructive on, so it's not going to hurt anything. It's going to save all that work. Then what we've got is, if we turn on Polyframe, what's kind of cool about this is if we run the polish on everything, it'll polish everything to a nice degree, but I want to save some of the work that we got going on in here. So I can hold down Control and Shift and click on this, and I can hold down Control and just click in the open viewport just to mask what's visible. Control Shift click in the open viewport again to bring everything back. And if you want to inverse your mask, you can hold Control and drag a marquee in the open viewport. Sorry, that gets rid of it. Hold down Control and just tap, and you can invert the mask that way. Control I also inverts the mask. And what I can do is hold down Control and click on the mask, and it'll blur the mask out a little bit and expand it out this way a little bit, and I can hit Control I for that. And now it's going to kind of hold that shape, and we can run the polish feature, and maybe I'll do a pretty high level, maybe it's like 40 or something like that at that point. And again, remember the polish, this is on my interface, but it actually exists right down here under deformation, and there's a polish here. I made a mistake here. So I'm going to hit undo and go back. And the mistake is this. I forgot to do the Dynamesh master first. So I'm going to put this at about 2 million polygons, run the Dynamesh master. So it's going to make it a new Dynamesh mesh for us. I'm going to hit undo. I don't like, I guess there's a blur function on there, and I was expecting that it was going to keep this a little bit tighter for some of the details on there. So maybe I'm going to run this, select this like this, Control Shift select that, and Control click to make the mask, and then I'll just blur the mask, hold down Control and click it just a little bit like this, and then we'll polish and take a look what we got. And maybe get rid of the mask and maybe polish. Again, the other thing we could do, I could mask this and invert the mask on here, and then double click the mask to kind of expand that out. Now if I use polish by features, we can actually, it'll look at the polygroups and tighten that stuff up. So that's kind of a different effect than just polishing. So you can see we can kind of crispen up those edges a little bit. Because what polish by feature does, it looks at your polygroups that you have, and it polishes it, but it polishes each polygroup separate from each other. So with those two things, polish, that's going to give you a nice polish and rounding of the whole thing. Polish by features can really maybe sharpen features back up. Okay, so that's how we're going to make this more kind of complex part. And then once that was done, then I think it was just a matter of taking the blade that I had and appending the high-res blade that I had and appending this new shape to that. And you can see we're starting to build up the whole new body for this piece.